The first scream came before the fire. It tore through the valley like a blade, raw, human, and abruptly cut short, as if something had decided the sound itself was unnecessary. The silence that followed felt heavier than the noise, pressing down on the cliffs, the trees, the very air. Darius Kane froze mid-step. He had heard screams before. Too many. On battlefields. In burning towns. Under skies that rained ash instead of clouds. But this one was different. Because it ended too cleanly. A faint orange glow flickered below the ridge. Darius dropped to one knee, raising his scope slowly, carefully, like even the movement might give him away. Beside him, Sergeant Miles Carter exhaled under his breath. "Tell me that's not what I think it is," Carter whispered. Darius didn't answer. He already knew. Through the scope, the valley came into focus, shattered carts, scattered supplies, villagers scrambling in panic. And at the center of it all, the dragon. It was enormous. Larger than any record they'd studied. Black scales layered like armor, catching the firelight in sharp, jagged reflections. Its wings were partially folded, but even then they stretched wide enough to blot out half the wreckage around it. Its eyes burned. Not just glowing, burning, like twin furnaces held behind glass. Darius adjusted the focus, expecting chaos. Expecting destruction. Expecting fire. But the dragon didn't move. It stood still. Watching. "What is it doing?" Carter murmured. That was the problem. It wasn't doing what it should. A wounded man crawled through the dirt, dragging himself away from the wreckage. Blood streaked behind him in a dark trail, his breathing uneven, desperate. He looked over his shoulder once, and froze. The dragon had turned. Slowly. Deliberately. It stepped forward. Each movement was controlled. Measured. The ground trembled beneath its weight, but there was no frenzy, no hunger-driven lunge. Just intent. Darius tightened his grip on the rifle. "Here it comes," he muttered. Carter steadied his own weapon. "Say the word." The man on the ground tried to push himself faster, but his strength failed. He collapsed, rolling onto his back, staring up at the creature towering over him. The dragon lowered its head. Closer. Closer. Its jaws parted. Heat shimmered in the air. Darius inhaled sharply. Now. But the fire didn't come. Instead, a thin stream of flame slipped from the dragon's mouth, narrow, precise, controlled like a cutting torch. It touched the man's side. He screamed. But not in agony. The sound shifted, twisting into something else entirely. Relief. The bleeding stopped. Darius blinked. Once. Twice. His finger eased off the trigger without him realizing it. "What?" Carter's voice faltered. "What did it just do?" The dragon pulled back slightly, observing its work. The man lay still for a moment, breathing hard, then slowly, hesitantly, pressed a hand to his side. No blood. No wound. He stared up at the creature, fear still in his eyes, but now mixed with something else. Confusion. The dragon exhaled again, softer this time. A faint curl of warmth drifted over the man, like heat from a distant fire on a cold night. It wasn't hunting. It wasn't killing. It was helping. Darius lowered the rifle completely. "That's not possible," he said under his breath. "Dragons don't do that," Carter added. "No," Darius said, his voice tightening. "They don't." Below them, the chaos had slowed. The villagers, those who hadn't fled, were watching now. Carefully. Fearfully. But none of them were running anymore. A child stepped forward. Darius stiffened. "No, no, no, get back." But the boy didn't hear him. Or maybe he didn't care. He walked straight toward the dragon. Toward death. Carter shifted beside him. "Do we take the shot?" Darius hesitated. Every instinct screamed yes. This was wrong. All of it. Dragons didn't heal. They didn't protect. They didn't hesitate. They destroyed. That was the rule. That was the truth. And if something broke that truth, it meant something far worse. The dragon noticed the child. Its massive head turned, eyes locking onto the small figure approaching without fear. For a moment, everything seemed to stop. Wind. Breath. Time itself. Then, slowly, the dragon lowered itself. Not striking. Not lunging. Lowering. Its enormous body sank closer to the ground, wings folding tighter, movements careful, deliberate, as if it understood its own size, its own strength, and the danger it posed. The child stopped just a few steps away. Close enough to die. Close enough to touch. The dragon leaned in. Its snout hovered inches from the boy. Darius's heart slammed against his ribs. "Say it," Carter whispered urgently. "Say it and I'll end this." Darius opened his mouth. But no command came. Because the dragon's eyes had changed. They weren't burning anymore. Not like before. The fire was still there, but softer now. Controlled. Focused. Aware. A faint glow built in its throat. Heat shimmered again. The boy didn't flinch. Didn't move. Didn't run. The dragon exhaled. A soft breath of warmth rolled over the child, gentle as sunlight. The boy's face lit up, not with fire, but with a smile. A laugh escaped him. Clear. Bright. Alive. Carter went completely still. "It's sharing." Darius didn't respond. He couldn't. Because in that moment, something far more terrifying than a dragon settled into his mind. Not fear. Not danger. But the quiet, creeping realization that everything he thought he knew might be wrong. Below, the dragon lifted its head again. Slowly. Carefully. And then, it turned. Not toward the villages. Not toward the forest. But toward the cliffs. Toward them. Darius felt the weight of its gaze even before he looked through the scope again. Those burning eyes locked directly onto his position. It had seen them. No. It had known they were there the entire time. Carter swallowed. "We've been made." Darius didn't move. Didn't breathe. Because the dragon wasn't reacting like it should. No roar. No attack. No fire. It simply watched. And then, the corner of its massive jaw lifted. Not fully. Not clearly. But enough. Enough to make Darius's blood run cold. Because it looked like the dragon was smiling. They should have retreated. That was protocol. Observe. Record. Fall back. No hesitation. No risks. And never, under any circumstances, linger once a dragon knew your position. But Darius Kane didn't move. Neither did the dragon. For a long, suffocating moment, the valley felt frozen in time. The wind slowed. The distant crackle of fire softened. Even the villagers below seemed caught between panic and something else, something uncertain. "Darius," Sergeant Miles Carter whispered. "We've been spotted. That's our cue to leave." "I know," Darius said. But he didn't lower the scope. He kept the dragon's eye centered, watching for the shift, the subtle tightening of muscle, the inhale before a blast of fire, the violent lunge that always came next. Except it didn't. Instead, the dragon blinked. Slow. Calm. Deliberate. Like it wasn't preparing to attack. But thinking. Carter shifted uneasily beside him. "I don't like this." "You're not supposed to," Darius replied quietly. Below, the villagers had begun moving again. Not running, moving. Carefully. Slowly. As if testing invisible boundaries. And the dragon let them. No roar. No warning. No claim over territory. Just observation. "That's wrong," Carter muttered. "Everything about this is wrong." Darius didn't argue. Because he was starting to realize something worse than wrong. This was new. A flicker of movement caught his eye. The boy. Still there. Still too close. Why hasn't anyone pulled him back? Carter said under his breath. Darius didn't answer. Because no one was trying. The child stepped forward again, small boots crunching softly against dirt and ash. Every instinct Darius had screamed that this was the moment, the fatal mistake before the inevitable strike. "Take the shot," Carter urged. "If it moves." "I see it," Darius cut in. His finger rested on the trigger. Ready. Waiting. The dragon lowered its head. Slowly. Carefully. Not like a predator closing in, but like something cautious. Aware of its size. Aware of the fragility in front of it. The boy raised his hand. And touched it. Carter inhaled sharply. No way. Darius didn't fire. He couldn't. Because nothing happened. No snap of jaws. No burst of flame. Just stillness. The dragon held there, unmoving, as if the contact meant something. Its eyes dimmed slightly, the harsh glow softening into something almost warm. "It's letting him," Carter whispered. Darius shook his head faintly. "No. It's choosing to." That was the difference. That was the part that didn't fit. A low rumble rolled through the air, not a threat, not a warning. Something deeper. Almost steady. Like a heartbeat echoing through the valley. The boy laughed. Actually laughed. The sound carried all the way up the cliffs, clear and bright in a place that should have been filled with fear. Darius lowered his rifle an inch. I don't understand, he admitted. Maybe we're looking at it wrong, Carter said. Darius glanced at him. What does that mean? Carter hesitated. What if it's not acting strange? What if this is just how it is? Darius almost dismissed it. Almost. But then the dragon shifted. One massive wing extended slightly, not enough to threaten, not enough to trap, but just enough to block the wind brushing through the valley. Shielding the child. The word formed in Darius's mind before he could stop it. Protecting. No, he said under his breath. Dragons don't protect. But the image below didn't care about what dragons were supposed to do. An older man approached next, leaning on a staff. He moved slowly, each step careful, deliberate. The dragon turned toward him. Darius tensed again. But once more, nothing. The old man stopped, then bowed his head. Not out of terror. Out of respect. Carter exhaled quietly. They're accepting it. They're making a mistake, Darius replied automatically. But his voice lacked certainty now. Because mistakes didn't usually feel this, controlled. The dragon inhaled. Darius saw it instantly, the subtle rise of its chest, the growing glow in its throat. Fire, he warned. Carter raised his weapon. This is it. The villagers froze. The boy didn't move. The dragon exhaled. Warmth spread outward in a steady wave, not scorching, not violent. Just heat. Controlled and even. Torches reignited. Dying embers flared back to life. Even the broken cart nearby caught a small, steady flame, contained, useful. It's lighting fires, Carter said in disbelief. Darius stared. Every action had purpose. Every movement measured. This isn't instinct, he said slowly. Carter glanced at him. Then what? Darius hesitated. Because the answer felt impossible. Choice. The dragon lifted its head, scanning the valley, not like a ruler claiming land, but like something aware of everything around it. Then it looked back at the cliffs. At them. Carter stiffened. There it is again. Darius raised the scope, locking onto its eye. It knows we're here, he said. No kidding. No, Darius continued, voice quieter now. It knew from the start. Carter's grip tightened. Then why hasn't it attacked? Darius didn't answer right away. Because the truth was becoming harder to ignore. The dragon had every chance. Every advantage. And yet, it did nothing. No aggression. No warning. Just watching. Darius exhaled slowly. Because it's observing us, he said. Carter frowned. Like we're observing it. Darius nodded faintly. Yeah. Below, the villagers gathered closer, fear fading into cautious trust. The boy still stood beside the dragon, hand resting against its scales like it belonged there. Darius felt something shift inside him. Not belief. Not yet. But doubt. And doubt, in his line of work, was dangerous. Carter finally broke the silence. We report this. Darius hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, he said. We report it. And then? Darius kept his eyes on the dragon. We wait. A pause. And we see what it does next. Because for the first time, he wasn't sure who was studying who anymore. They returned the next day. And the day after that. And the day after that. Each time, Darius Kane expected something to change. For the illusion to break. For the dragon to snap, to remind them all what it really was. But it never did. Instead, it kept doing the impossible. From the ridge above, Darius lay prone, scope steady, eyes tracking every movement below. Beside him, Sergeant Miles Carter had stopped asking if the dragon would attack. Now he just watched, like Darius. Trying to understand. It's earlier today, Carter muttered, checking the light. Came back before sunrise. Darius didn't respond immediately. He was focused on the valley. On the dragon. On Emberfall. He still refused to say the name out loud, but the villagers used it freely now. Like it had always belonged to the creature. The dragon moved between the broken homes with slow, deliberate steps. Gone was the wreckage from days before. In its place, structure. Repaired walls. Reinforced beams. Signs of rebuilding. Darius adjusted his scope. A group of villagers stood near a collapsed stone house. The dragon lowered its head, exhaling a narrow, controlled stream of flame, not to burn, but to shape. The stone softened, edges glowing faintly before settling into place. It's fixing it, Carter said. Darius watched the precision. The restraint. That kind of control shouldn't be possible, he replied. Neither should healing wounds, Carter shot back. Darius didn't argue. Because Carter was right. Below, the dragon stepped back, observing its work, just like it had with the injured man. Waiting. Evaluating. Learning. That's the part one don't like, Darius said. Carter glanced at him. The helping? No, Darius replied. The thinking. Silence settled between them again. Because they both understood what that meant. This wasn't instinct. This wasn't random. This was adaptation. A sharp whistle echoed from below. Darius shifted his scope. The boy again. Always the boy. He ran toward the dragon, fearless as ever, carrying something in his hands. A bundle of sticks, firewood. Darius frowned. What's he doing? They got their answer quickly. The boy dropped the wood in a small pile and stepped back, looking up expectantly. At the dragon. Waiting. Carter let out a quiet breath. No way. The dragon tilted its head slightly, as if studying the arrangement. Then it leaned forward, releasing a tiny flicker of flame, just enough to catch the wood. A small fire sparked to life. Controlled. Contained. Useful. The boy grinned. Darius stared. It understands, Carter said softly. Darius didn't reply. Because that wasn't the terrifying part. The terrifying part was this. It was choosing to help. The dragon shifted again, moving toward the edge of the village. A group of farmers stood nearby, pointing toward a damaged irrigation channel. Darius tracked the movement. Now what? The dragon crouched low, claws digging into the earth. Slowly, carefully, it dragged soil and stone into place, reinforcing the channel walls. Redirecting water flow. Improving it. Carter shook his head in disbelief. That's not just helping, that's problem solving. Darius exhaled slowly. Yeah. And that made it worse. Because problem solving meant foresight. Planning. Understanding outcomes. This wasn't just a creature reacting to the moment. It was thinking ahead. A low rumble rolled through the sky. Darius's head snapped upward instinctively. Dark clouds gathered on the horizon. Fast. Too fast. Storm, Carter said. Darius narrowed his eyes. That's not a normal one. The wind shifted sharply, cutting through the valley with sudden intensity. Loose debris scattered. The small fires flickered violently. Below, the villagers began to panic. This time, the dragon reacted immediately. It lifted its head, scanning the sky. Its posture changed, not aggressive, not defensive, but alert. Focused. It knows, Carter said. Darius nodded slightly. Yeah, it knows. The storm hit faster than expected. A brutal wave of freezing wind tore through the valley, slamming into homes, extinguishing fires, ripping through the fragile repairs the villagers had just begun. People shouted, scrambling for cover. The boy stumbled, nearly falling as the wind knocked him sideways. Darius tensed. This is where it goes wrong. Because chaos always led to destruction. That was the rule. That was how dragons worked. But Emberfall didn't lash out. It didn't panic. It moved. Fast. With purpose. The dragon spread its wings, not to take flight, but to block the wind. One massive wing angled toward the village, acting like a barrier against the storm's force. Debris slammed against it, but the dragon held firm. Shielding them. Carter's voice dropped. It's protecting them. Darius didn't respond. Because he was watching something else. The dragon inhaled. Deep. Deeper than before. The air itself seemed to shift. Darius, Carter said, tension rising. That's a lot of fire. I see it. The glow in the dragon's throat intensified, brighter, hotter, more concentrated than anything they had seen yet. This could wipe the whole valley, Carter warned. Darius didn't argue. Because it could. Easily. The dragon lifted its head toward the sky. Not the villagers. Not the ground. The storm. It exhaled. Fire erupted, but not in a wild explosion. It spread outward in a controlled wave, rising into the air like a shield of heat. The flames didn't consume, they pushed. The freezing wind faltered. The biting cold softened. Across the valley, dying fires reignited. Warmth spread through homes, through people, through everything the storm had tried to take. Darius watched in silence. The storm didn't stop completely. But it weakened. Enough. Enough for the village to survive. The dragon lowered its head slowly, the glow fading from its throat. Exhaustion. Darius saw it clearly now. Even something that powerful had limits. Carter let out a long breath. That wasn't destruction. No, Darius said quietly. Below, the villagers emerged slowly, looking around in disbelief. Fires burned again. Structures still stood. The boy looked up at the dragon, eyes wide, not with fear, but awe. They weren't running. They weren't hiding. They were safe. Because of it. Darius lowered his rifle. That's not a weapon, Carter said. Darius didn't answer right away. Because for the first time, he didn't have one. And that scared him more than anything. Not everyone saw a miracle. From the cold, reinforced walls of high command, what happened in the valley looked very different. It's adapting. General Victor Hale stood at the head of the war room, his voice sharp, controlled, and completely devoid of doubt. The massive screen behind him replayed the footage, emberfall shaping stone, lighting fires, shielding villagers from the storm. Acts of protection. Acts of control. Acts of intelligence. To Hale, acts of escalation. Dragons are not capable of cooperation, he continued. They are apex predators. If this one appears to be helping, then it is learning how to manipulate. Across the table, officers exchanged uneasy glances. No one spoke at first. Because Hale wasn't wrong. Dragons had never shown restraint. Never shown empathy. Never shown choice. Until now. Darius stood near the edge of the room, arms crossed, jaw tight. He had watched the same footage replay a dozen times now, and every time, the same thought pushed harder against everything he believed. This isn't manipulation, he said finally. The room went still. Hale's gaze snapped toward him. Explain. Darius stepped forward, ignoring the weight of every eye on him. It had multiple chances to attack, he said. It didn't. It healed, it built, it protected. That's not strategy, that's intent. Hale's expression didn't change. Intent can be deceptive. With respect, sir, Darius replied, voice steady, if it wanted those people dead, they would be. Silence followed. Because that part was undeniable. Hale turned back to the screen. Or perhaps it's waiting. Gaining trust. Learning behavior patterns before it acts. Carter, standing a few steps behind Darius, muttered under his breath, that's a stretch. Hale heard him. It's survival, the general snapped. We do not assume a predator has changed its nature. We assume it has improved its tactics. Darius clenched his fists. And what if it hasn't? Hale turned fully now, his presence filling the room. Then we eliminate a potential threat before it becomes an uncontrollable one. There it was. The decision. Not observation. Not patience. Action. Sir, Darius started. Orders have already been issued, Hale cut in. A strike team is mobilizing. Heavy weapons. Anti-dragon artillery. Darius felt something drop in his chest. You're sending a full assault. I'm ending a risk. That risk just saved an entire village, Darius shot back. And next time, Hale said coldly, it might decide not to. The room fell silent again. Because that was the fear. Not what the dragon was doing now. But what it could do later. Hale stepped closer, lowering his voice just enough to make it more dangerous. You've seen what it's capable of, he said. That level of control, that level of intelligence, if it turns hostile, we won't get a second chance. Darius met his gaze. And if it doesn't? Hale didn't hesitate. We don't gamble with human lives. The words hit hard. Because they weren't wrong. But they weren't entirely right either. Hours later, the valley came back into view. This time, Darius wasn't watching from a distance. He stood at the front of a fully armed strike team, rows of soldiers behind him, weapons loaded, artillery units locking into position along the ridge. The air felt heavier. Different. Carter stepped up beside him, glancing at the equipment. This is overkill. Darius didn't respond. Because he knew exactly what it was. Insurance. Against something they didn't understand. Orders are clear, Carter continued. We engage if it shows any sign of aggression. Darius nodded faintly. But his eyes were already on the valley. On Emberfall. The dragon stood near the center, just as it had every day. Villagers moved around it, working, rebuilding, living. Trusting it. That made this worse. Positions, Darius ordered quietly. Soldiers spread out, weapons raised, sights trained. The shift in atmosphere was immediate. Below, the villagers noticed. Movement slowed. Voices dropped. Fear returned. And the dragon. It reacted. Its head lifted, turning toward the ridge. Toward them. Darius felt the familiar tension snap into place. This was it. This was where everything broke. Hold, he said into the comm. The dragon took a step forward. Not fast. Not aggressive. But enough. Weapons clicked into ready position behind him. Easy, Carter murmured. Emberfall stopped. Its gaze locked onto Darius. Recognition. Darius felt it immediately. It remembered him. From the cliffs. From the watching. And somehow, that made this worse. Darius, Carter said quietly, it knows. I know. The dragon moved again, slower this time. More cautious. Like it understood the shift in tension, the weight of the weapons aimed at it. It wasn't advancing. It was approaching carefully. Trying not to provoke. That realization hit Darius harder than anything else so far. It's adjusting to us, he said. Carter glanced at him. You mean it's nervous? No, Darius replied. I mean it's trying not to scare us. Behind them, a targeting system locked in with a sharp tone. Artillery ready. Darius's jaw tightened. Stand by. The dragon stopped again. Then, slowly, it lowered its head. Not in submission. Not in weakness. But in something that looked dangerously close to trust. The villagers didn't run. They watched. Waiting. The dragon opened its jaws. A glow built in its throat. Instantly, weapons tensed. Target is charging, a soldier called out. Hold your fire. Darius snapped. The glow intensified. Carter's voice dropped. Darius. I said hold. The dragon exhaled. But not a blast. Not a wave of destruction. A single, small flame drifted forward, floating, controlled, almost weightless. It hovered in the air. Right in front of Darius. Close enough to feel its warmth. A flicker of fire. Harmless. Offered. Darius stared at it, his mind racing. Behind him, dozens of weapons remained trained, waiting for the order. One word. And everything would end. The dragon didn't move. Didn't push forward. It just waited. Holding that small flame between them. Sharing it. Carter whispered, what is it doing? Darius didn't look away. Because deep down, he already knew. It's giving us a choice. The flame hovered between them. Small. Weightless. Impossible. Darius Kane stared at it, every instinct in his body screaming that this was wrong. This was a trick, a distraction, the final moment before everything turned to fire and ash. Behind him, dozens of weapons remained locked on target. Artillery primed. Triggers waiting. One word from him. And the dragon would die. Or they would. There was no middle ground. There had never been a middle ground. Until now. Darius, Sergeant Miles Carter said quietly, tension threading through his voice. Say the word. Darius didn't answer. His eyes stayed on the flame. It didn't flicker wildly like normal fire. It moved slowly, steadily, almost as if it were breathing. Alive, but not dangerous. Warm, but not consuming. An offering. The dragon didn't move. Emberfall stood perfectly still, its massive form towering over the valley, yet somehow, not threatening. Its head remained lowered, eyes fixed on Darius, not with dominance, not with hunger. But with something far more unsettling. Expectation. It's waiting, Carter said. I know. That's not better. No. It wasn't. Because waiting meant intention. It meant the dragon understood this moment mattered. Darius took a slow step forward. Behind him, weapons shifted instantly. Hold your positions, he barked without turning around. Boots froze. Safety clicks echoed. But no one relaxed. You really doing this? Carter asked under his breath. Darius didn't respond. Another step. The flame drifted closer, as if meeting him halfway. The heat brushed against his face now, not searing, not sharp, just present. Like standing near a quiet fire on a cold night. Memories flickered in his mind. Burned villages. Blackened skies. Dragons circling overhead, leaving nothing behind. That was what fire meant. That was what dragons were. So why wasn't he pulling the trigger? Because this isn't that, he muttered. Carter frowned. What? Darius didn't answer. He stepped closer again. Now only a few feet separated him from the flame. From the dragon. From the choice. General Hale is going to have your head for this, Carter warned. Yeah, Darius said quietly. Probably. The comm crackled to life. Right on cue. Kane, General Victor Hale's voice cut through, sharp and furious. Report. Darius ignored it. Kane, you are ordered to engage immediately. That is a direct command. The flame hovered inches from his outstretched hand. Darius hesitated. Not because he was afraid of the fire, but because he understood what this meant. If he accepted it, everything changed. Kane. Hale snapped. Stand down or you will be relieved of command. Darius exhaled slowly. Then, finally, he reached out. His gloved hand passed through the flame. For a split second, his entire body tensed, waiting for pain, for heat, for the inevitable burn. But it never came. Instead, warmth. Steady. Controlled. Safe. The flame curled around his fingers like it recognized him. Like it welcomed him. Behind him, silence fell. Total. Complete. Even the wind seemed to pause. Carter's voice dropped to a whisper. No way. Darius closed his hand slightly, feeling the heat settle, not on him, but with him. Not something to endure. Something to hold. Something to share. He looked up. The dragon was still watching him. Not looming. Not threatening. Waiting. Darius nodded faintly. A decision made without words. Behind him, a soldier's voice broke the silence. Sir, what are your orders? Darius didn't turn around. Stand down, he said. A pause. Sir? The soldier asked, unsure. Stand. Down. One by one, weapons lowered. Artillery powered off. The tension that had gripped the ridge began to crack, replaced by something unfamiliar. Uncertainty. Carter let out a breath he'd been holding for far too long. You just changed everything. Yeah, Darius said quietly. I know. The comm exploded again. Kane, that is an illegal order. Darius reached up and switched it off. Silence returned. For the first time since this began, real silence. He stepped forward again, closing the distance. The dragon didn't move away. Didn't react. It simply allowed him closer. Until he stood at the edge of its shadow. Up close, Emberfall was even larger, scales like black steel, heat radiating from its body in steady waves. Power beyond anything humanity could control. And yet, it had chosen not to use it. Darius lifted his hand again, the one still holding the flame, and slowly pressed it against the dragon's snout. Contact. Warm. Solid. Real. The flame flickered once, then spread. Not wildly. Not destructively. It split, small streams of light drifting outward, touching the ground, the air, the space between soldiers and villagers alike. Tiny sparks. Each one carrying the same steady warmth. Carter stepped forward cautiously, watching one of the flickers hover near him. After a moment, he reached out. And it didn't burn him either. A quiet laugh escaped him. I'll be damned. Below, the villagers watched in awe. No fear. No panic. Just understanding. Darius looked back at the dragon. At Emberfall. You're not trying to rule, he said softly. The dragon exhaled, a low, steady rumble that felt almost like an answer. You're trying to teach. Another soft rumble. Darius nodded slowly. Yeah, he said. I think we needed that. Above them, the storm clouds had finally begun to break apart, sunlight cutting through in thin beams across the valley. For the first time, the place didn't look like a battlefield. It looked alive. Carter stepped up beside him. So what now? Darius watched as soldiers lowered their weapons completely, some of them cautiously reaching toward the drifting sparks, others simply staring in disbelief. Now. Darius repeated. He glanced at Emberfall one last time. Then back at his own people. We learn. Carter smirked faintly. From a dragon. Darius nodded. Yeah. A pause. From a dragon who figured it out before we did. High above, Emberfall spread its wings, not as a threat, not as a display of power, but as a shield, casting a wide shadow over both humans and village alike. Not ruler. Not weapon. Something new. And as the last of the weapons fell silent, humanity didn't conquer the fire. They accepted it. And in doing so, they finally understood something that had always been within their reach. Power didn't have to destroy. It could protect. It could build. It could be shared. And sometimes, the greatest strength wasn't in holding the fire, but in choosing to give it away.